My life, until recently, was a series of perfectly plotted coordinates. I am a cartographer, and my world is one of precise measurements, of lines that connect points with unwavering accuracy. I applied this same precision to my marriage to Genevieve. I charted the rise and fall of her laughter, the delicate curve of her smile, the subtle shifts in her temperament. I believed I understood her, that our life together was a meticulously drawn map, a journey we were navigating with shared purpose. Genevieve, however, possessed a spirit that yearned for uncharted territories. She craved spontaneity, a wildness I could not provide. I now understand that my attempts to map her emotions, to understand her every nuance, were perceived as constraints, as invisible lines that confined her. I thought I was building a fortress of understanding around our love, but I realize now that I was constructing a cage. The first indication of a deviation from our charted course was subtle, almost imperceptible. A slight delay in her return from her art classes, a lingering, unfamiliar fragrance that clung to her clothes, a fleeting flicker of unease in her usually serene eyes. These were not dramatic shifts, not grand pronouncements of infidelity, but rather the faint tremors that precede a seismic event. I began to notice these anomalies, these inconsistencies in the patterns I had so carefully observed. I didn't confront her. Instead, I began to map these deviations, tracing the path of her altered movements, the subtle changes in her routines, the unspoken secrets that hung in the air between us. It was like observing a ship veering off course, a slow, almost imperceptible drift that, if left unchecked, would lead to a collision. I meticulously logged each discrepancy, each uncharacteristic behavior, each moment of evasiveness. I felt a coldness creeping into my heart, a sense of betrayal that was not yet fully formed but was growing with each passing observation. I was not a man prone to emotional outbursts. My reactions were always calculated, measured like the lines on my maps. I knew that I would not resort to shouting or accusations. Instead, I would use my skills, my understanding of patterns and connections, to navigate this new, treacherous landscape. I would create a map of her betrayal, a chart of her deception, and I would use it to guide my response. I would transform our home, our shared space, into a reflection of this map, a labyrinth of hidden truths and concealed intentions. I would make her confront the consequences of her actions, not with anger, but with the chilling precision of a cartographer who has discovered a flaw in his most intricate design. Our home, a sprawling Victorian manor nestled amidst rolling hills, had always been a sanctuary, a place of order and tranquility. Now it became my canvas, a space to be reshaped, redesigned, and repurposed. I began to see its potential, its hidden corners, its overlooked spaces. I studied its blueprints, its architectural intricacies, its hidden passages and forgotten rooms. I saw not a home, but a labyrinth, a maze of my own design. I started with the mirrors. I replaced the standard, flat surfaces with subtly curved ones, distorting reflections, creating illusions of depth and distance. I rearranged the furniture, creating narrow passageways and dead ends, forcing a change in the established flow of the house. I installed hidden speakers, their wires snaking through the walls like unseen veins, capable of carrying whispers and echoes. I modified the lighting, creating pockets of shadow and pools of light, manipulating perception and creating a sense of unease. I worked in secret late into the night, my tools my instruments of transformation. I sealed off rooms, creating hidden chambers, accessible only through concealed doors and secret panels. I altered the floor plan, creating false walls and misleading corridors. I transformed the familiar into the unfamiliar, the comforting into the unsettling. I was building a stage, a setting for a drama that would unfold with chilling precision. The house became a physical manifestation of my inner turmoil, a reflection of the fractured trust and the growing sense of betrayal. The once familiar rooms now held a sense of menace, a feeling of being watched, of being trapped. I was creating a space where Genevieve would be forced to confront the consequences of her actions, where the walls themselves would bear witness to her deception. I wasn't driven by rage, but by a cold, calculating determination. I was an architect of revenge, constructing a labyrinth of psychological torment. I wanted her to feel the disorientation, the confusion, the sense of being lost that I felt. I wanted her to understand the depth of her betrayal, not through angry words or violent actions, but through the subtle, insidious manipulation of her environment. I wanted her to see the map of her deception, not on paper, but in the very fabric of our home. I was creating a masterpiece of psychological manipulation, a testament to the power of observation and the chilling precision of a cartographer scorned. While I meticulously reshaped our home, I also began to map Genevieve's clandestine movements. I observed her routines, her patterns, her moments of distraction. I noted the subtle changes in her schedule, the unexplained absences, the whispered phone calls. I began to piece together the fragments of her betrayal, like a cartographer assembling a map from scattered fragments. Through careful observation and discreet inquiries, I identified the other man. His name was Damien, a renowned art critic, a man whose world revolved around the same galleries and exhibitions that Genevieve frequented. He was charismatic, sophisticated, a stark contrast to my own reserved and methodical nature. I imagined their encounters, their stolen moments, their whispered conversations, and a cold fury began to simmer beneath my carefully constructed composure. I delved into Damien's life, researching his background, his habits, his vulnerabilities. I studied his photographs, his writings, his social media presence. I learned about his love for fine wines, his penchant for expensive suits, his weakness for flattery. I was gathering intelligence, building a profile of my adversary, understanding his motivations and desires. I decided to incorporate Damien into my labyrinth. He would be an unwitting participant in my carefully orchestrated drama, a pawn in my game of revenge. I would lure him into my web, draw him into the heart of my carefully constructed maze. He would become a part of my map, a figure whose movements I would control, whose fate I would determine. I began to leave subtle clues, hints of Genevieve's infidelity, scattered like breadcrumbs in Damien's path. I planted seeds of doubt, whispers of suspicion, designed to pique his curiosity and fuel his desire. I manipulated their encounters, orchestrating chance meetings, creating opportunities for their paths to cross. I was weaving a tapestry of deception, drawing them both deeper into my carefully constructed web. I knew that their affair was built on a foundation of lies and secrets. I would exploit those weaknesses, use their own deceit against them. I would turn their clandestine rendezvous into a trap, their stolen moments into a nightmare. I would make them confront the consequences of their actions, not in the heat of passion, but in the cold, harsh reality of my labyrinth. With the physical labyrinth nearing completion, I turned my attention to the psychological manipulation of my prey. I wanted to create an environment where their perceptions would be challenged, their senses distorted, their reality undermined. I wanted them to question everything they saw, heard, and felt. I began by subtly altering the environment. I introduced subtle scents, faint whispers of unfamiliar perfumes and colognes, designed to trigger subconscious associations and evoke memories of their clandestine encounters. I manipulated the temperature, creating pockets of warmth and coolness, playing with their sense of comfort and unease. I introduced subtle sounds, the creaking of floorboards, the rustling of curtains, the distant echo of footsteps, creating an atmosphere of anticipation and paranoia. I utilized technology to further distort their reality. I installed hidden cameras and microphones throughout the house, capturing their every move, their every conversation. I used these recordings to create a series of audio and visual illusions, designed to disorient and confuse them. I projected images onto the walls, fleeting glimpses of their secret rendezvous, distorted reflections of their own guilt and fear. I played recordings of their whispered conversations, their intimate moments, their betrayals, amplifying their sense of paranoia and unease. I wanted them to feel as if the house itself was watching them, judging them, condemning them. I wanted them to question their own sanity, to doubt their perceptions, to lose their grip on reality. I was creating a psychological funhouse, a distorted reflection of their own deceit and betrayal. I was the puppet master, pulling the strings, manipulating their emotions, orchestrating their downfall. I was the architect of their despair, the cartographer of their demise. I was crafting a masterpiece of psychological manipulation, a testament to the power of observation and the chilling precision of a betrayed husband. The stage was set, the labyrinth complete, the psychological traps laid. Now it was time to lure my prey into the heart of my carefully constructed web. I needed a plausible reason to bring Genevieve and Damien to the house, a pretext that would not arouse suspicion. I decided to host a weekend retreat, a small gathering of friends and acquaintances, under the guise of celebrating a recent professional achievement. I invited a few close colleagues, some of Genevieve's art world associates, and, of course, Damien. I presented it as an opportunity to relax, to unwind, to enjoy the company of like-minded individuals. I carefully curated the guest list, ensuring a mix of personalities and interests that would keep Genevieve and Damien occupied and distracted. I planned a series of activities, games, and social events designed to create a sense of camaraderie and shared experience. I wanted them to feel comfortable, at ease, unaware of the danger lurking beneath the surface. I paid particular attention to the details, ensuring that the atmosphere was both inviting and subtly unsettling. I chose music that was both soothing and subtly dissonant, creating a sense of unease beneath the surface. I decorated the house with a mix of familiar and unfamiliar objects, creating a sense of disorientation and displacement. I served food and drinks that were both delicious and subtly intoxicating, lowering their inhibitions and clouding their judgment. I was the gracious host, the attentive friend, the concerned husband. I played my role to perfection, masking my true intentions behind a veneer of warmth and hospitality. I watched them closely, observing their interactions, their body language, their subtle cues. I was gathering information, assessing their vulnerabilities, planning my next move. The trap was set, the bait laid. I waited patiently, like a spider in its web, for my prey to wander into my carefully constructed lair. The weekend retreat began with a sense of forced gaiety. Guests milled about, making polite conversation, admiring the house and its grounds. Genevieve, ever the social butterfly, flitted from group to group, her laughter echoing through the halls. Damien, charming and urbane, held court in the library, surrounded by a cluster of admirers. I watched them both, a predator assessing its prey, noting their movements, their interactions, their vulnerabilities. As the evening progressed, I subtly steered the guests towards the labyrinth. I organized a scavenger hunt, a playful game designed to lead them deeper into the heart of the house. I provided clues, riddles, and puzzles, each one leading them further down the rabbit hole. They laughed, they competed, they explored, unaware of the true nature of the game they were playing. Genevieve and Damien, caught up in the excitement, followed the trail with enthusiasm. They solved the riddles, deciphered the clues, and navigated the maze with growing confidence. They were like children lost in a fairy tale, oblivious to the danger lurking around every corner. I watched them from the shadows, my eyes gleaming with a cold satisfaction. They were walking into my trap, step by step, lured by their own curiosity and their desire to win. I had designed the labyrinth to be both alluring and disorienting, a place where reality blurred and perception became unreliable. As they ventured deeper into the maze, the atmosphere grew heavier, the air thick with anticipation. The playful banter subsided, replaced by a sense of unease. The laughter faded, replaced by hushed whispers and nervous glances. The guests began to realize that this was no ordinary game. I had them where I wanted them. They were trapped in my web, caught in my carefully constructed labyrinth. The descent had begun. The labyrinth was designed to disorient and confuse. Hallways stretched into improbable lengths, seeming to shift and change with every turn. Mirrors reflected distorted images, creating a sense of unease and paranoia. Doors led to unexpected destinations, or simply vanished altogether. The guests, initially amused by the game, grew increasingly agitated. Their laughter turned to nervous whispers, their confidence to uncertainty. Genevieve and Damien, separated from the others by the labyrinth's winding paths, found themselves alone in a seemingly endless corridor. The air was thick with tension, their earlier excitement replaced by a growing sense of dread. They could hear the muffled sounds of the other guests, distant voices echoing through the maze, but they could no longer see them. As they walked, they began to notice subtle anomalies. The temperature fluctuated, shifting from warm to cold with no discernible pattern. Faint scents, reminiscent of their secret rendezvous, drifted through the air, triggering memories and fueling their anxieties. Whispers, barely audible, seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, hinting at their betrayal, echoing their deepest fears. I, hidden in my control room, watched their every move on the monitors, a spider at the center of its web. I listened to their conversations, their whispered anxieties, their growing suspicions. I controlled the environment, manipulating the temperature, the lighting, the sounds, playing with their senses, pushing them to the brink of their endurance. The labyrinth was not merely a physical maze. It was a psychological torture chamber, designed to break down their defenses, to expose their vulnerabilities, to force them to confront the consequences of their actions. It was a space where their deepest fears and insecurities were amplified, where their guilt and shame were laid bare. And as they wandered deeper into the labyrinth, lost in its twists and turns, they began to realize that they were not just playing a game. They were being played. Genevieve and Damien stumbled upon a grand hall, its walls lined with mirrors from floor to ceiling. The reflections were distorted, elongated, grotesque. Genevieve saw a twisted version of herself, her face pale and drawn, her eyes wide with fear. Damien appeared gaunt and skeletal, his features stretched and contorted. They moved through the hall, their distorted reflections multiplying endlessly, creating a dizzying spectacle of fractured images. They tried to speak, but their voices echoed strangely, distorted and amplified by the unusual acoustics of the room. Their words seemed to lose all meaning, dissolving into the cacophony of echoes. The mirrors not only distorted their physical appearance, but also reflected their inner turmoil. Genevieve saw her own guilt and shame magnified in the twisted reflections, her secret desires exposed in the grotesque images. Damien saw his own vanity and superficiality reflected back at him, his carefully constructed facade crumbling under the scrutiny of the mirrors. The Hall of Mirrors was a space of self-confrontation, a place where they were forced to face the ugliness of their betrayal. It was a psychological torture chamber, designed to break down their defenses, to strip away their illusions, to expose the raw truth of their actions. I watched them from my hidden vantage point, a grim smile playing on my lips. They were trapped in their own reflections, confronted by the consequences of their choices. The Hall of Mirrors was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation, a testament to my understanding of human nature and my desire for revenge. As they stumbled through the hall, their reflections mocking them, their voices echoing in the distorted space, they began to realize the true nature of the labyrinth. It was not just a game, it was a reflection of their own twisted reality, a distorted image of their own betrayal. Emerging from the Hall of Mirrors, disoriented and shaken, Genevieve and Damien found themselves in a grand dining hall. A long, ornate table was laden with a sumptuous feast. Glistening roast meats, platters of exotic fruits, crystal decanters filled with fine wines. The aroma of spices and roasted meats filled the air, a tantalizing invitation to indulge. Yet, something was amiss. The room was eerily silent, devoid of any human presence. There were no servants, no guests, no music. Only the faint crackling of the fire in the hearth broke the silence. As they approached the table, hesitant at first, they noticed that the food was strangely cold, the wine flat and lifeless. The fruits were overripe, their flesh soft and decaying. The meats were dry and tough, their surfaces covered in a thin film of dust. The feast was a phantom, a cruel illusion designed to taunt their senses. It was a reminder of the pleasures they had sought in their secret affair, pleasures that were now rotten and decaying, like the food on the table. Genevieve felt a wave of nausea wash over her, the sight of the decaying feast triggering a deep sense of revulsion. Damien, his appetite waning, pushed his plate away, a look of disgust on his face. The phantom feast was a metaphor for the emptiness of their betrayal, the hollowness of their stolen moments. It was a reminder that their affair, built on lies and deceit, could never truly satisfy their deepest desires. I watched them from my hidden observation post, a flicker of satisfaction in my eyes. They had tasted the fruits of their betrayal, and they had found them bitter and unsatisfying. The phantom feast was a lesson in the futility of their actions, a reminder that true fulfillment could not be found in deceit and deception. Driven by hunger and a desperate need to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the dining hall, Genevieve and Damien wandered into an adjoining gallery. The walls were lined with portraits, their subjects gazing down with stern expressions. As they moved through the gallery, they noticed something peculiar. The portraits seemed to be whispering. At first, they dismissed it as a trick of the mind, a product of their heightened anxiety. But as they moved closer to the paintings, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They could hear snippets of conversations, fragments of their own secret rendezvous, their whispered promises, their betrayals. Genevieve recognized her own voice, echoing from the portrait of a stern-faced matron, confessing her dissatisfaction with her marriage, her longing for excitement and passion. Damien heard his own voice, emanating from the portrait of a haughty nobleman, boasting of his conquests, his disdain for commitment. The gallery of whispers was a space of accusation, a place where their own words were used against them. It was a reminder that their secrets were not as safe as they thought, that their betrayals had left a trail of evidence, a record of their deceit. I had carefully selected the portraits, choosing subjects whose expressions and postures mirrored the emotions and actions of Genevieve and Damien. I had installed hidden speakers behind each painting, playing recordings of their conversations, their confessions, their betrayals. The Gallery of Whispers was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation, a testament to my ability to use technology and art to expose their deepest secrets. It was a space where they were forced to confront the consequences of their actions, where their own words condemned them. As they hurried through the gallery, their ears ringing with the whispers of their own betrayals, they realized that they were not just trapped in a physical labyrinth. They were trapped in a web of their own making, a prison of their own deceit. Panic began to set in. The whispers, the distorted reflections, the phantom feast. It was all too much. Genevieve and Damien, their nerves frayed, their confidence shattered, found themselves at a crossroads within the labyrinth. Two paths diverged before them, each leading into the unknown. A sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air. They knew, instinctively, that this was no ordinary fork in the road. This was a deliberate separation, a calculated division. I, observing from my hidden sanctuary, had activated a series of hidden mechanisms within the labyrinth. Walls shifted, doorways appeared and disappeared, pathways rearranged themselves. The maze was reconfiguring, splitting itself in two, forcing a separation. Genevieve and Damien, with a shared look of fear and uncertainty, were forced to choose separate paths. Each was now alone, isolated in the heart of the labyrinth, confronted by their own anxieties and regrets. The divided labyrinth was a metaphor for the isolation that their betrayal had created. It was a physical manifestation of the distance that had grown between them, the chasm that their deceit had carved into their relationship. Genevieve, walking down her solitary path, felt a wave of loneliness wash over her. The playful excitement of the game had vanished, replaced by a gnawing sense of dread. She realized, with a chilling certainty, that she was utterly alone. Damien, on his own path, felt a surge of panic. The confidence he had exuded earlier had evaporated, replaced by a fear he had never known before. He was lost, trapped in a maze of his own making. The divided labyrinth was a test, a trial by fire. It was a challenge to their resilience, their courage, their ability to confront their own demons. And as they wandered through its twisting corridors, they knew that they were not just facing the physical challenges of the maze. They were facing the consequences of their own actions. Alone in the labyrinth, separated from Damien and the other guests, Genevieve's carefully constructed facade crumbled. Stripped of her social armor, she was confronted by the raw truth of her actions. The echoes of her laughter, her flirtations, her whispered confessions, now mocked her from the shadows. Each turn in the maze brought her face to face with a new reflection of her betrayal. In a dimly lit alcove, she found a mirror that showed her not her physical form, but a distorted image of her soul, stained with deceit and infidelity. In a hidden chamber, she stumbled upon a tableau of her own creation, a collection of objects that symbolized her secret desires, her hidden longings, the things she had sought in Damien's arms. The labyrinth was no longer just a physical space. It had become a journey into the depths of her own being. It was forcing her to confront the woman she had become, the woman who had betrayed her husband's trust, the woman who had compromised her own values. With each step, the weight of her guilt grew heavier. She remembered the promises she had made to Elias, the vows she had broken, the trust she had shattered. She saw the pain she had inflicted, the hurt she had caused, the love she had squandered. The labyrinth was a crucible, refining her, stripping away the layers of pretense and self-deception. It was forcing her to confront the consequences of her choices, to acknowledge the damage she had done. And as she wandered through its twisting corridors, she began to understand the true cost of her betrayal. Meanwhile, Damien, lost in his own section of the labyrinth, was experiencing his own descent into self-recrimination. The charm, the wit, the sophistication that had always been his armor were now useless. He was alone, stripped bare, confronted by the emptiness of his pursuits. The labyrinth was a mirror, reflecting their true selves back at them. It was a journey of self-discovery, a painful but necessary confrontation with the consequences of their actions. And as they wandered through its twisting corridors, they began to understand the true meaning of betrayal. As Genevieve and Damien wandered through their respective labyrinths, lost in their own reflections and regrets, I, the architect of their torment, prepared for the final act. It was time to reveal myself, to step out from the shadows and confront them with the full extent of my knowledge and control. I entered the labyrinth, not as the meek and unassuming husband they thought they knew, but as the master of the maze, the puppeteer pulling the strings. I walked with purpose, my footsteps echoing through the corridors, my presence announcing itself with a chilling authority. Using the labyrinth's hidden mechanisms, I guided them towards a central chamber, a grand amphitheater where the final act would unfold. As they entered the chamber, disoriented and exhausted, they found themselves facing a massive screen, upon which a map was projected. It was not a map of the world, nor a map of the house. It was a map of their betrayal. Every secret rendezvous, every stolen moment, every whispered confession was meticulously charted, their movements traced with chilling precision. The map was a testament to my obsessive observation, my meticulous documentation of their deceit. Their faces, pale and drawn, reflected the horror of their exposure. They saw their own actions laid bare, their secrets revealed in stark detail. The map was an indictment, a condemnation, a visual representation of their betrayal. I stood before them, my voice amplified by the labyrinth's hidden speakers, explaining the intricacies of the map, detailing their every move, exposing their every lie. I was the judge, the jury, the executioner. I was the cartographer of their demise. You thought you could hide your actions, I said, my voice echoing through the chamber. You thought you could escape my notice. But I have seen everything. I have heard everything. I have mapped your every move. Their silence was deafening. They had no defense, no excuses. The map was irrefutable evidence of their guilt. This labyrinth, I continued, is a reflection of your own deceit. It is a maze of your own making. And now you are trapped in it. The weight of their exposure hung heavy in the air. Genevieve and Damien, their faces etched with shame and regret, stood before the map of their betrayal, their illusions shattered, their secrets laid bare. I, the architect of their downfall, watched them with a cold detachment, my heart a barren landscape devoid of pity. You have a choice, I said, my voice resonating through the chamber. You can remain here, trapped in this labyrinth, forever haunted by the ghosts of your actions. Or you can attempt to escape, Their eyes flickered with a glimmer of hope, a desperate yearning for redemption. But the path to freedom is not easy, I warned. It is a test, a trial by fire. You will be forced to confront your deepest fears, your darkest secrets. You will be challenged to the very core of your being. I presented them with a new map, a smaller, more intricate one. This was not a map of their betrayal, but a map of the labyrinth itself, a guide to its hidden passages, its secret chambers, its treacherous traps. This map will lead you to the exit, I explained. But it is not a guarantee of escape. The labyrinth is a living entity, constantly shifting and changing. You will need to rely on your instincts, your intuition, your ability to adapt. I placed the map on a pedestal in the center of the chamber. The choice is yours, I said. Remain here and face the consequences of your actions, or take the map and attempt to escape. But be warned, the path to freedom is fraught with peril. I stepped back, leaving them alone with their decision. The silence in the chamber was deafening, broken only by the sound of their ragged breathing. They looked at each other, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. The offer was a test, a final challenge. It was an opportunity for redemption, a chance to prove their worth. But it was also a gamble, a risky proposition with no guarantee of success. The fate of their relationship, their future, their very lives hung in the balance. Genevieve and Damien, their hands trembling, reached for the map. They knew the risks, the dangers that lay ahead, but the alternative, a life trapped in the labyrinth of their own making, was unbearable. With a shared glance, a silent agreement forged in the crucible of their shared ordeal, they embarked on their final journey. The path was treacherous, filled with twists and turns, dead ends and hidden traps. They relied on each other, their earlier betrayals replaced by a newfound sense of cooperation and trust. They deciphered the map's cryptic symbols, navigated its intricate pathways, and faced their fears with a courage born of desperation. The labyrinth, sensing their resolve, seemed to resist their progress. Walls shifted, doorways vanished. The very ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble. But they persevered, their determination fueled by the desire for freedom, the yearning for redemption. After what seemed like an eternity, they emerged from the labyrinth, blinking in the sunlight, their bodies weary, their spirits battered but unbroken. They had faced their demons, confronted their betrayals, and emerged from the crucible transformed. They stood before me, their eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and defiance. They had escaped the labyrinth, but they had also escaped the confines of their past. They were no longer the people they had been before entering the maze. They had been tested, refined, and ultimately redeemed. I watched them walk away, their figures receding into the distance. The labyrinth, its purpose fulfilled, stood silent and empty, a monument to my obsession, my revenge, my love. The aftermath was a tapestry of conflicting emotions. There was satisfaction in knowing that I had exposed their betrayal, that I had forced them to confront the consequences of their actions. But there was also a sense of emptiness, a realization that my elaborate scheme had not brought me the closure I had sought. The labyrinth had served its purpose, but it had also taken its toll. It had exposed the darkness within me, the depths of my obsession, the destructive power of my love. In the end, I was left with nothing but the echoes of their footsteps, the fading memory of their presence, and the silent labyrinth, a constant reminder of the love I had lost and the revenge I had exacted.